The river roared like an angry beast, throwing waves against the sharp rocks. The water was dark and wild, rushing fast as if it wanted to swallow everything that touched it. A human traveler stood on the edge, looking down. His boots were muddy, his clothes torn from days of walking through the forest. He was tired, but his eyes were sharp. Something was wrong in the water. He saw movement, a flash of pale skin, arms flailing desperately. It was not just a random shadow. It was a woman. She was drowning. Her hands reached out of the water for a moment and then sank back under. He could hear her muffled cry before the river dragged her down again. His heart raced. There was no time to think. He threw off his jacket and jumped into the freezing current. The water hit him like ice knives, cutting his breath short, but he pushed forward. His arms fought against the river, his legs kicking hard. He was a strong swimmer, but even for him, the water was deadly. The woman appeared again, coughing, gasping for air, her hair clinging to her face. He reached out, his hand grabbing her wrist tightly. For a moment, she struggled, panicked, not knowing who was holding her. But then her strength gave out, and she let him pull her closer. He could feel her trembling, her body cold and weak. Her lips moved, but no words came, only broken sounds lost in the rush of water. The current tried to tear them apart, slamming them against rocks. His shoulder hit hard against stone, sending pain shooting down his arm, but he did not let go. He wrapped his other arm around her waist, holding her tight. The weight made it harder to stay afloat, but he kicked with everything he had. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he pushed forward, inch by inch, until finally his feet touched ground beneath the shallow side of the river. He pulled her onto the bank, both of them gasping for air. She lay on the ground, coughing out water, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Her clothes were strange, not like anything human women wore. They were made of a thin, silver-like fabric that clung to her body, now torn and wet. Her skin was different too, smooth with a faint glow under the moonlight, like starlight was trapped inside her veins. Her eyes opened slowly, wide and bright, with colors no human eyes ever had, deep violet, almost glowing. The human froze, staring. She was not a woman from his world. She was alien. Yet right now, she looked so fragile, so close to death, that nothing else mattered. He bent down, pressing his hand against her back, helping her breathe. Her lips parted, whispering a weak sound. It was not a language he understood, but it carried a tone of desperation, of fear and hope mixed together. She grabbed his arm suddenly, her fingers digging into his skin. For someone so weak, her grip was still powerful. Her eyes locked onto his, as if she wanted to burn his face into her memory. He felt something strange in his chest, not just fear or relief, but something deeper. He had saved people before, back on Earth, but this felt different. This felt important. The forest around them was silent except for the rushing river and her shallow breathing. The moon shone on them both, painting the scene silver. She tried to sit up, but her body failed. He gently pushed her back down, shaking his head. "Rest," he whispered, even though he knew she could not understand his words. She blinked slowly, her eyes softening as if she understood anyway. Then came the sound, distant voices, sharp and strange. He turned his head. Across the trees, shadows were moving, figures, tall and slender, carrying spears that glowed faint blue in the darkness. They were coming fast, their movements precise, like hunters who had finally found their prey. The human felt his heartbeat quicken. He looked at the alien woman again. Her eyes widened in alarm, as if she knew what was coming. She tried to speak again, this time louder, her voice trembling. He could not understand, but the fear in her tone was clear. She clutched his arm tighter, almost as if begging him not to leave her. The voices grew louder. The figures were nearly at the riverbank now, their glowing eyes fixed on him, then on the woman beside him. The human stood, putting himself between her and the approaching group. His body ached, his clothes stuck to his skin, and his breath was still heavy from the struggle in the river. But his stance was firm. He didn't know who these people were or what they wanted, but he knew one thing clearly. He had saved her, and he was not going to let her be taken back into danger. The alien woman whispered something again, softer this time, almost like a plea. Her hand slid from his arm and rested against the wet grass. She was too weak to move anymore. Her glowing eyes did not leave him. In that gaze, he saw gratitude. And something else, something he could not name. The figures finally reached them, their spears raised, their strange voices echoing in the night. One of them pointed at the human, then at the woman, and then spoke words he could not understand. But their tone was not just anger. There was shock. There was disbelief. It was as if they had witnessed something forbidden. The human braced himself, ready for whatever was coming. The woman, lying weak on the ground, gave him one last look that said more than words ever could. Her clan had arrived, and from the way they looked at him, his life had just changed forever. The warriors surrounded him in a circle, their glowing spears pointing close to his chest. The human stood still, breathing hard, water dripping from his hair and clothes. His hands were empty, but his eyes stayed sharp. He looked down once at the alien woman lying weak on the ground beside him. She coughed again, trying to move, but the warriors quickly lifted her and held her gently, like she was someone important. Their tall frames blocked the moonlight, casting shadows across the riverbank. One warrior, older than the rest, stepped forward. His face was marked with strange lines, glowing faintly in the dark, as if carved by light itself. His voice was deep, carrying weight and command. He pointed at the human, then at the woman, and spoke words in a language the human did not understand. The other warriors murmured in response, their eyes wide. Some looked angry, others seemed almost afraid. The human clenched his fists. He didn't know what they were saying, but he could feel the tension. It was not just about him being a stranger. It was something more. The elder spoke again, louder this time, his hand raised toward the stars, then thrust toward the human's chest. A hush fell over the warriors. The alien woman's eyes widened as she heard the words, her body trembling even in her weakness. One of the younger warriors turned to her, asking something in their tongue. She shook her head slowly, then her violet eyes drifted back to the human. The elder's voice thundered again, and this time the human understood a single word. The sound was clear, sharp, and repeated several times, law. The human frowned. He had no idea what law they meant, but the way the elder said it made his chest tighten. He looked at the woman. She bit her lip and lowered her head. The warriors lifted her up carefully and placed her on a decorated stretcher, glowing threads running across its surface. But even as they moved her, her eyes did not leave the human. There was fear, there was confusion, but there was also something hidden, like she knew what was about to happen. The elder then spoke directly to the human. The words were alien, but his tone was sharp, final, and filled with authority. He raised his glowing staff high, and the warriors echoed his words in unison. The human could not understand the meaning, but he felt the weight of it, as if a sentence had been declared. One warrior stepped forward and pressed the tip of his spear to the human's chest, not enough to pierce, but enough to warn. Then he lowered the weapon and gestured for the human to follow. The human glanced at the forest, at the path where he could run. He could escape if he tried, but something in him stopped. His eyes moved back to the woman lying weak on the stretcher. She was staring at him, silently, as if begging him not to leave. He sighed and took a step forward. The warriors closed in tighter, guiding him along the path through the forest. Their movements were silent, disciplined, like shadows slipping between trees. The only sound was the low hum of their weapons and the crackling of their glowing torches. The human walked with them, every sense alert, waiting for a chance to understand what was happening. After some time, they reached a wide clearing. Strange symbols glowed on the ground, circles drawn in patterns of light. At the center stood a tall stone pillar covered in carvings. The alien woman was placed gently at the base of the pillar, her breathing calmer now. The elder raised his staff and began to chant, the warriors following his voice in deep harmony. The forest echoed with their sound, like the earth itself was listening. The human stood near the circle, watching. Suddenly, one of the younger warriors came to him and, with surprising gentleness, placed a woven cloak around his shoulders. The cloak glowed faintly, marked with the same symbols as the pillar. The human frowned, confused. He didn't ask for this. Why were they treating him like part of their ritual? Then the elder's voice boomed again. This time, the alien woman spoke in her weak, trembling voice. She looked at the human, her lips forming words slowly, carefully, as if trying to speak his language. Her accent was broken, but the meaning was clear. "You saved me," she whispered. "Now, by sacred law, I belong to you." The human froze. His heart skipped a beat. He stared at her, unable to believe what he had just heard. Belong? Did she mean it literally? The warriors around him nodded firmly, some bowing slightly toward him. Their glowing eyes watched his every reaction. The elder stepped closer, his voice solemn as he repeated the same words in their tongue, pointing first at the woman, then at the human. The human shook his head in disbelief. No, that's not. No, I didn't save her for this, he protested, though he knew they couldn't understand his language. He pointed at himself, then at her, shaking his head furiously. But the warriors only looked at him with puzzled expressions, some frowning, some smirking, as if amused by his resistance. The woman closed her eyes briefly, her face tightening with pain. When she opened them again, they shimmered under the moonlight. She whispered again, forcing the words out. Law is old, cannot break. You, keep her now. The human felt cold inside. Keeper? Owner? Was this some kind of twisted custom? He had risked his life to save her, but he never expected this. The warriors cheered loudly, their voices rising together as if celebrating a bond sealed by fate. The elder lifted the staff high, declaring the final words of the ritual. The human stood frozen, his fists clenched. He could feel all their eyes on him, watching, expecting him to accept. He looked at the woman, lying weak but calm now, her gaze locked on his. He didn't know whether she wanted this or hated it, but her eyes carried a silent message. His choice no longer mattered. The law had already decided. And in that moment, as the chants filled the forest and the glowing symbols burned brighter on the ground, the human realized the truth. He had stepped into a world with rules he could not escape. And now, because he had saved her from drowning, her entire clan believed she was his. The human was taken to the clan's camp, a place deep inside the forest where strange lights glowed from carved stones and tall huts rose in a circle. The air smelled of smoke and herbs, and everywhere he looked, alien eyes followed him. Some stared with respect, some with anger, and some with curiosity. He could feel their whispers around him, though he could not understand the words. It was clear, however, that he was now the center of their attention. The warriors led him to a tent larger than the others, its entrance decorated with woven banners glowing faintly in the dark. Inside, the air was warm and filled with the scent of burning oils. They gave him food, strange fruit that glistened like crystals, and a drink that shimmered in the cup. He hesitated at first, but drank anyway, the taste sharp and sweet. Even then, he could feel the weight of eyes watching him, judging his every move. The alien woman, the one he had saved, was brought into the same tent but placed across from him. She was dressed now in dry robes of flowing silver cloth, her wet hair brushed and braided by two young attendants. Her violet eyes met his for only a moment before looking away quickly. She seemed nervous, her hands fidgeting in her lap. The human wanted to speak, to ask her what was happening, but the language barrier was too strong. Hours passed, and the human learned the clan did not intend to let him go. Every time he moved toward the entrance, a guard stepped forward silently, blocking his path. He was not a prisoner locked in chains, but he was still trapped. The people outside still whispered, pointing toward the tent. Their looks were filled with meaning he could not yet understand. At night, the camp grew quieter. Fires burned low, and shadows stretched long. The human lay awake on the ground, staring at the glowing patterns on the tent ceiling. Sleep did not come. He thought of home, of Earth, and of how strange his life had become since entering this world. He had saved someone's life, but instead of thanks, he was now caught in a law that declared ownership of another being. The weight of it pressed heavy on his chest. Then he heard movement, soft footsteps on the rugs. He sat up quickly, his eyes narrowing. The alien woman had approached. Her attendants were gone, and the firelight cast her face in a dim, golden glow. She looked unsure, but her steps carried determination. She stopped just in front of him, her hands clutched together tightly. "You, human," she said, her voice halting, broken with effort. The human's eyes widened. She was trying to speak his language. "You, not, understand law." He blinked in surprise. "You can. Speak?" he asked slowly, keeping his words simple. She nodded weakly. "Little, not much. Learn from traitors." She looked down, shame in her eyes, before whispering, "Law, old, sacred, cannot break." The human frowned, his fists tightening. "This law says, you belong to me?" His tone was sharp, angry. She closed her eyes for a moment and then nodded once. Saved life means life joined. Clan, not allow, separate. He let out a long breath, anger and confusion swirling inside him. I didn't save you for this. I saved you because it was right. Her eyes softened at his words, but her face showed fear too. If you refuse, clan punish. You, me, both. The human stared at her in silence. The idea of punishment for refusing such a law felt absurd, but the serious look in her eyes told him it was true. This was not a simple custom. It was survival. If he turned away from it, both of them would pay the price. He rubbed his forehead, frustration gnawing at him. So I have no choice? He asked quietly. She hesitated and then whispered, choice, dangerous. Clan, watch you. Some want, see you fail. The human understood then. This was not just about him and her. This was about power, about control, and about how the clan wanted to enforce their law to keep traditions alive. He realized he had walked into a web he could not easily break free from. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Then she sat down beside him, her movements careful, as if she feared he might reject her. She did not touch him, but kept her eyes on the floor. Finally, she whispered, I, grateful. You saved me. But now, your life, my life, same. The human looked at her, at the way her shoulders shook slightly, at the fear hidden in her voice. She was not proud of this law either. She was trapped in it, just as much as he was. For the first time, he saw not just an alien woman, but a person bound by rules she did not choose. Outside, faint voices could still be heard. The clan's people were awake, waiting, watching, expecting. The human knew they were testing him, studying his every reaction. If he tried to run, he would not make it far. If he resisted openly, both he and the woman would suffer. He leaned back against the wall of the tent, staring at the glowing ceiling. His voice was low when he finally spoke. Then I will stay, for now. But not because of your law, because you are alive. That is what matters. She turned her head slowly toward him, her violet eyes wide. A small breath escaped her lips, half relief, half disbelief. She nodded softly, as if those words gave her strength. The night passed, heavy with unspoken tension. The human closed his eyes but could not sleep. His mind raced with questions about what would come next. He knew one thing for certain. He had been dragged into something larger than himself. This was no longer about a rescue at the river. It was about survival in a world bound by laws he did not understand, and a woman whose fate was now tied to his own. And in that dark, silent night, he realized something else. He was no longer just a stranger in their world. He was now part of it, whether he wanted to be or not. The night was silent, except for the sound of the fire outside the tent. The human sat with his back against the wooden post, staring at the ground, his mind heavy with questions. He had been forced into a law he never asked for, surrounded by people who did not trust him, tied to a woman he barely knew. His body was tired, but his thoughts refused to let him rest. Then he heard soft footsteps again. He lifted his head. The alien woman had entered the tent quietly. This time she was alone, without attendants, her silver robe flowing around her like water. The dim light of the burning lanterns painted her face in shadows and gold. She moved closer, her eyes cautious, as if every step toward him was dangerous. When she stopped just a few feet away, she lowered her voice. You saved me, she said slowly, her accent heavy but her words clearer than before. But you do not understand what you did. The human frowned, his arms crossing over his chest. Then explain, he said simply. She looked down, her fingers gripping the cloth of her robe tightly. Not just woman of clan, bloodline. She hesitated, then forced the words out. High bloodline, chosen for joining with warlord. The human's eyes narrowed. Joining? She nodded, shame flickering across her face. Marriage? No, not like human. It is trade. Clan give me to warlord. He give clan protection, weapons, food. My life, not mine. The human leaned forward, anger flashing in his eyes. So they were going to give you away like property? Her shoulders shook as she nodded again. Yes, I accept long time. No choice. But River changed all. She lifted her eyes to his, her violet gaze sharp and trembling at the same time. By law, now I belong to you. That means I no longer belong to Warlord. The human finally understood the fear he had seen in the warrior's eyes earlier. By saving her, he had broken a chain of power. A deal had been destroyed. This was not just about a sacred law. It was about angering someone powerful, someone who would not forgive. Then that warlord will come for you, the human said, his voice low and certain. For us, she corrected quietly. He will not see difference. He will want me back, or he will want your death. Silence fell between them. The fire outside crackled faintly, but inside the tent, the air grew heavier. The human studied her face. She looked fragile, but there was strength hidden beneath her fear. She had lived her life as a pawn, but now, because of one moment in the river, everything had changed. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "So, what do you want from me?" he asked. Her lips parted, but she did not answer immediately. She walked a little closer and then sat on the ground across from him, folding her legs beneath her. Her hands rested in her lap, shaking slightly. Finally, she whispered, "I want freedom." The human tilted his head. "Freedom from the clan? From the warlord? Or from this law that ties you to me?" She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the floor. "All." Then she looked back at him, her voice stronger now. "But alone, I cannot. Clan will never let me go. Warlord will never stop. Only, with you, I have chance." The human studied her for a long time. He remembered the way she had looked in the river, her hand clutching his arm, her eyes begging him not to let go. Now she was asking him again, not with her hand, but with her whole life. "You think I can fight your clan's law and your warlord?" he asked, half bitter, half curious. She shook her head quickly. "Not fight. Survive. Outsmart. You are different. Human. You think different than us. You saved me with no reason. That is strength clan does not understand." Her words struck him deeply. He had always thought saving her was only instinct, a simple act of humanity. But here, in this world of rules and power, his choice was seen as something impossible, something dangerous. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "If I stay, I make enemies. If I run, they kill me. So either way, I'm trapped." Her voice softened. "I am trapped too, but together, maybe we can find way." For the first time since the rescue, her eyes softened not with fear, but with something close to hope. She reached forward carefully, as if testing him, and placed her hand lightly over his. Her skin was warm, smooth, glowing faintly under the lantern's light. The touch was gentle, not forced by law or custom, but real. The human looked down at her hand, then back at her face. He saw honesty there. Pain? Yes. Fear? Yes. But also a spark of trust. Slowly, he turned his hand and closed his fingers lightly over hers. Her breath caught for a moment, then she relaxed, her shoulders easing. For the first time, she allowed a small, fragile smile to appear. But the moment did not last long. Outside, a horn blew, low and deep, shaking the night. The woman's smile vanished instantly, her face turning pale. She pulled her hand back, standing quickly. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They come. Not clan. Him." The human stood as well, his muscles tense. He could feel the danger in the air, heavy and close. Whoever him was, the sound of that horn carried power and threat. The alien woman looked at him with fear and urgency. "Now you see," she said. "Rescue not end story. Rescue start war." The human clenched his fists, his heart pounding. He had only wanted to save a drowning woman. Instead, he had stepped into a storm that could change both their lives forever. The horn's echo still lingered in the air when the clan gathered in the great circle at dawn. Fires burned high, casting long shadows across the glowing stones. The human stood in the center, his body tense, while hundreds of alien eyes watched him. Whispers rose and fell like waves, their voices carrying doubt, fear, and curiosity. The woman he had saved sat to the side, weak but upright, her violet eyes locked on him with quiet intensity. Then the elder stepped forward. His staff glowed brighter than the flames, and his deep voice silenced the crowd. He pointed the staff at the human and spoke words heavy with authority. Though the human could not understand the language, the tone was clear. It was a judgment. The people roared in agreement. The woman whispered in her broken human tongue, "They test you. You prove worthy or die." The human's jaw tightened. He already knew he was trapped, but hearing the words from her lips made his chest heavy. He looked around. The clan had formed a wide ring, their faces expectant. They wanted to see if this outsider deserved the life he had claimed by saving her. The elder raised his staff again, and 3 young warriors stepped forward, their armor gleaming, their weapons glowing with strange energy. They were taller, stronger, faster looking than any human he had seen. They moved with the confidence of predators. The first test began. One of the warriors lit a torch with blue fire and placed it before the human. Then, with sharp motions, he pointed at the flames, then at the human's bare hands. The human frowned, realizing what they wanted. They were testing endurance. They wanted him to hold the burning torch. He clenched his teeth, reached forward, and wrapped his hands around the wood. Heat shot up his palms, searing his skin, but he refused to let go. The crowd murmured, some gasping, some sneering. The alien woman's hands clutched her robe tightly as she watched. The pain grew worse with every second, the fire biting into his flesh, but the human stared straight ahead, refusing to show weakness. Finally, the elder raised his hand, and the warrior took the torch away. The human's palms were red, his skin blistered, but he had not cried out. The crowd erupted with noise, some in approval, others still doubtful. The second warrior stepped forward. He carried two curved blades that glowed faint green. He tossed one at the human's feet, the meaning clear. A combat test. The human picked up the weapon. It felt strange in his grip, lighter than steel, balanced differently. The warrior lunged forward, fast as lightning. The human barely managed to dodge, the blade slicing through the air where his arm had been. Instinct took over. He blocked, parried, and countered. The crowd shouted, the fight moving in a blur. The warrior was skilled, every move sharp and deadly. But the human fought with something the alien did not expect, unpredictability. He feinted, used his feet, his shoulders, even the ground itself to gain advantage. When the warrior swung high, the human ducked and slammed his elbow into the warrior's ribs. When the warrior pressed forward, the human stepped back, waited, then struck when least expected. The fight lasted long, sweat pouring down the human's face, his muscles screaming. At last, he twisted the alien's wrist, sending the glowing blade flying into the dirt. The warrior staggered back, shocked, his chest rising and falling heavily. The human did not press the attack. He simply dropped his own blade and stepped away. The crowd erupted again, this time louder. Some shouted in anger, but many cried out in respect. The alien woman's lips parted slightly, her eyes shining with something close to pride. Then the third warrior stepped forward. He carried no weapon, no fire, only a bowl filled with water that shimmered unnaturally. He placed it on the ground before the human and pointed at the forest. The human frowned, not understanding, until the elder spoke again, his voice echoing through the trees. The woman whispered, "Last trial. Hunt, you bring back beast, alive." The human's heart sank. He was exhausted, his hands burned, his body bruised. But the trial was not over. He was handed a net woven with glowing threads, light but strong. Then the elder gestured to the forest, and the crowd parted to let him pass. The woman looked at him one last time before he left. Her voice was soft, filled with warning. "Beast strong. Many die. But you clever. Use clever." He gave her a small nod and disappeared into the dark trees. The forest was thick and silent, every step crunching over leaves. He held the net tightly, his eyes scanning for movement. Hours passed with no sign. Then, suddenly, he heard it, a low growl, deep and rumbling. The bushes ahead shook. A creature leapt out, larger than a horse, its body covered in dark scales, its mouth filled with glowing fangs. The beast charged. The human dodged, rolling across the ground, the air rushing from his lungs as claws ripped into the dirt where he had stood. He scrambled up, his mind racing. He could not fight it head on. The woman's words echoed in his head, "Use clever." He ran, weaving between trees, the beast chasing close behind. Its claws tore through bark, its roar shaking the air. The human spotted a fallen tree, its trunk angled upward like a ramp. He sprinted toward it, his breath ragged, and at the last second, he leapt aside. The beast lunged up the trunk, its heavy body unbalanced for a moment. That was his chance. He threw the glowing net, the threads wrapping around the beast's head and legs. The net tightened, glowing brighter as the creature struggled. It roared, thrashing, but the more it fought, the more the net held. The human pulled with all his strength until the beast finally collapsed, bound and snarling. Bruised and bleeding, he dragged the captured beast back to the clearing. The crowd fell silent as he stumbled into the circle, the creature thrashing in the net behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the elder raised his staff high, his voice booming with words the human did not understand. But he could feel the meaning. The people roared, their voices shaking the forest. Respect. Acceptance. The human dropped to one knee, breathing hard, sweat and blood mixing on his skin. The alien woman's eyes filled with tears as she looked at him. For the first time, she whispered with no fear in her voice, "You proved them wrong. You, worthy." And though the human's body screamed in pain, inside his chest burned a new fire. He had survived their trials, not by being stronger or faster, but by being human. The night after the trials, the camp was restless. Fires burned low, and the people whispered in worried tones. The human could feel the change in the air. Even though he had passed every test, even though the clan had cheered when he dragged the captured beast into the circle, the respect he earned was thin. Some admired him, but others glared with hate in their eyes. He knew it was not over. Victory in the trials had made him more dangerous, and that meant some wanted him gone even more. The woman he had saved sat quietly near him in the tent. Her eyes glowed softly in the firelight. She had been watching him all day, but now her voice was low, almost trembling. "You did well," she whispered in her broken human tongue. "Clan cannot deny, but danger not finished." The human frowned. "What do you mean?" She looked away, her hands clutching her robe tightly. "Elders, some loyal to Warlord, they fear him. They fear breaking deal. They want you gone." He understood at once. The trials were not the end. They were only the beginning. If the clan could not dishonor him openly, they would try to destroy him in the shadows. His survival had upset a balance, and now enemies were moving in silence. That very night, the attack came. The human woke to the sound of movement outside the tent. A faint shadow slid across the wall, then another. His instincts sharpened. He grabbed a wooden stick from the fire pit and stood ready. Suddenly, the flap of the tent was cut open, and two masked figures slipped inside, their blades glowing faintly blue. The woman gasped, crawling back, but one of the attackers grabbed her by the arm. She cried out, struggling, her eyes wide with terror. The other lunged toward the human. He blocked with the stick, the blade slicing through the wood like butter. He kicked the attacker in the stomach, sending him crashing into the tent post. The second attacker dragged the woman toward the exit, but the human dived forward, tackling him to the ground. The fight was desperate, silent, but deadly. Blades hissed through the air, and fists slammed into flesh. The human moved with raw determination, using every ounce of strength and instinct he had. One attacker tried to stab him, but he twisted aside, grabbing the warrior's arm and slamming it against the ground until the weapon fell. The other struck him from behind, pain exploding across his back, but he ignored it, spinning and driving his fist into the man's jaw. The woman cried out again, her voice sharp with fear. "Behind you!" The human turned just in time to see a blade aimed at his chest. He grabbed the warrior's wrist, the edge of the weapon grazing his skin, leaving a shallow cut. With a roar, he twisted, throwing the man over his shoulder. The attacker hit the ground hard, and the human grabbed the glowing blade, holding it steady in his hands. The two masked figures looked at him, then at each other. For a brief moment, hesitation filled their eyes. Then, with sharp hisses, they turned and fled into the night. Breathing hard, the human dropped the weapon and turned to the woman. She was trembling, her eyes wide, her hand clutching the spot where the attacker had grabbed her. He knelt beside her. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head quickly, but tears filled her eyes. "They wanted me. Take me back. Give to Warlord." The human clenched his fists. Now he knew the truth. The attack was not just to kill him. It was to drag her away, to erase what had happened at the river, to restore the old bargain. And they would not stop. She looked at him with desperation, her voice breaking. "Please, protect me. If I go back, I die." Her words hit him like a blade to the heart. She had no choice, no freedom. The law had tied her to him, but beyond the law, she was still hunted by her own people. He realized that her life rested in his hands now, whether he wanted it or not. He sat back, his chest rising and falling heavily. "They will come again," he said. "Stronger next time." She nodded slowly. "Yes, Warlord will not stop. He will send more, until he wins or until you fight." He looked into her eyes, searching for the truth behind her words. She wasn't asking him to obey the law. She wasn't asking him to own her. She was asking him to choose, to stand with her against everything that threatened her. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled faintly, shadows flickering across the tent. Finally, she whispered something that broke the silence like a storm. "I want you to claim me. Not for law, for choice. If you accept me, maybe clan protect. If not, they turn away." The human's breath caught. He stared at her, unable to speak for a moment. He had never asked for this, but now her plea carried weight heavier than any law. She was offering herself not as a prize, not as property, but as someone desperate for survival, someone willing to bind her fate to his by her own will. His mind raced. If he accepted, the clan might stand behind him. If he refused, she would be left unprotected, and the warlord would take her back. Every path led to danger, but one path at least gave her hope. He leaned forward, his voice low but steady. If I claim you, then you are mine. Not by their law, by my choice. Do you understand that? Her eyes filled with tears, but she nodded firmly. Yes, I want that. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He had never believed in destiny, but in this moment, it felt like everything had led him here. The river, the law, the trials, the attack. Now there was no turning back. Outside, the clan stirred, the night echoing with whispers. Somewhere in the distance, another horn sounded, sharp and cold. The warlord was moving. The human looked at the woman one last time. Her eyes glowed with fear, but also with a spark of determination. He reached out, placing his hand gently over hers. Her breath shook, but she did not pull away. We stand together, he said firmly, and for the first time, she smiled through her tears. But deep in both their hearts, they knew this was not the end. This was only the beginning of a greater fight, one that would decide not just her fate, but his as well. The morning sky was red like fire, the sun hidden behind dark clouds. The clan gathered in the great circle again, their faces tense, their voices low with fear. The human stood in the center, his body bruised from the attack of the night before, but his eyes were sharp. Beside him stood the alien woman, no longer weak, no longer trembling. She stood tall, her hand close to his, her violet eyes fixed on the horizon where the sound of war drums echoed through the forest. The warlord was coming. The ground shook with the heavy steps of soldiers. Soon, a line of warriors appeared, armored in black steel, their weapons glowing red with deadly heat. At their head rode the warlord himself, taller than any of his men, his body wrapped in heavy plates, his face hidden behind a mask shaped like the skull of a beast. His voice thundered across the clearing. He spoke words that the human could not understand, but their meaning was clear. He pointed at the woman, then at the human, then drew his blade. He wanted her back, and he wanted blood. The elder of the clan stepped forward, staff raised, trying to speak with honor. But the warlord struck the ground with his blade, sending sparks flying, his army roaring behind him. The message was clear. No talk, only war. The clan wavered, fear spreading among them. Some looked ready to give the woman up just to save themselves. Others clenched their fists, torn between law and survival. The human stepped forward, standing between the warlord and the woman. His voice rang out, strong and steady. She is not yours, he said, even though he knew they would not understand his words. She is mine to protect, and I will not let you take her. The woman's hand touched his arm lightly, her voice soft but fierce. Not only yours, I choose this too. Her words carried through the crowd, making the clan fall silent. For the first time, it was not just law binding them, it was her will. The warlord let out a roar, his mask twisting like a monster's face. He raised his weapon and charged. His soldiers followed, rushing like a wave of steel. The clan screamed, some running, some grabbing weapons. Chaos exploded in the clearing. The human braced himself. He had no armor, no great weapon, only a blade taken from the attackers the night before. But he had something else: courage, cleverness, and the will to fight for someone who had chosen him. The warlord swung his massive blade, the force shaking the ground. The human dodged just in time, the strike splitting the earth where he had stood. He countered, slashing at the warlord's side, but the blade glanced off armor. The warlord struck again, faster than his size should allow. The human rolled away, dust rising around him. The clan watched, frozen, as the human faced the monster alone. The woman shouted at them in her own tongue, her voice sharp, commanding. She reminded them of their law, of their honor, of the choice she had made. Some warriors hesitated, then raised their weapons and joined the fight against the warlord's men. The clearing became a battlefield of clashing steel and roaring cries. The warlord pressed the human hard, each strike like thunder. The human's arms ached, his breath came fast, but he refused to fall. He used speed over strength, dodging, striking at weak points, forcing the warlord to tire. At last, he saw his chance. The warlord lifted his blade high, ready to crush him. The human stepped in close, too close for the massive blade to swing, and drove his smaller weapon into the gap between armor plates at the warlord's side. The warlord roared in pain, staggering back. His mask cracked, showing a flash of glowing eyes filled with rage. He swung wildly, but the human ducked low, grabbed a fallen spear, and drove it upward with all his strength. The spear pierced through the warlord's chest. The giant let out a final, broken cry before collapsing to the ground with a crash that shook the clearing. Silence fell. The warlord's army froze, their leader lying dead at the human's feet. Slowly, one by one, they dropped their weapons and backed away into the forest, defeated. The human stood over the body, breathing hard, blood running down his arms. The woman rushed to his side, her hands trembling as she touched his face. "You live," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. "You saved me again." The clan stared in awe. The elder raised his staff high and shouted words that carried through the air. The people cheered, their voices rising together. The outsider was no longer just a stranger, no longer just bound by law. He had defeated the warlord with his own hands. He had earned their respect, their loyalty, and their protection. The woman looked at him, her face soft, her eyes glowing with a light that was not fear but trust, and something more. "Now, I belong," she whispered. Then she touched his hand and added, "Not by law, by choice." The human squeezed her hand gently, his tired eyes meeting hers. He had come into this world with nothing, but now he stood with everything: respect, purpose, and someone who had chosen to stand beside him. The crowd chanted his name, their voices echoing through the forest, but he did not hear them fully. His focus was only on her, the woman he had saved, the woman who had given him a reason to fight. The war was over, but their story was only beginning. In the shadow of the fallen warlord, under the glow of the rising sun, the human realized he had found something greater than survival. He had found a bond that even sacred law could not define, one born from choice, from courage, and from the simple act of saving a life.